I'm Brandon Amoroso, and this is the D2Z Podcast, building and growing your business from a Gen Z perspective.
Hey everyone, thanks for tuning in to D2Z, a podcast about using the Gen Z mindset to grow your business. I'm Gen Z entrepreneur Brandon Amoroso, founder and president of Retention as a Service Agency, Electric, as well as the co-founder of Scaleless. And today I'm talking with Eli Weiss, who's the VP of Retention Advocacy at Yotpo. Thanks for coming on.
Wait, I didn't know you're Gen Z, so you're a lot younger than I am, and you probably make most of your guests feel like they haven't done enough.
I'm going to decline to answer that one, but I'm fringe. I'm very fringe.
Okay.
So I'm 90. I'm 97, and Gen Z started at 96. So I just didn't want to be a millennial. And when I started the agency, it was like, a buzzword that I could use to get people to talk to whatever I was 20 at the time or 21. So
Incredible. Well, thanks for having me. I'm excited.
Before we jump in, can you give everybody just a brief background on you and your story?
Yeah, very quick background. I grew up in like a ultra-Orthodox Jewish universe, number 2 of 10 children. Grew up in New Jersey. Never graduated high school, never went to college, traveled to 30 countries before I was 21 years old. Got excited about startups because I needed a way into e-commerce. I needed a way into a job, I guess, period. Started at a luggage startup when I was living in Israel at the time. Was there for 4 years, jumped in as like a customer service job because I had no experience, spent 4 years doing everything there from, ops and logistics to running ads and meeting investors, et cetera, et cetera. Started a startup while I was there, bootstrapped it. It ended up kind of failing and we shut it down a couple of years later. Moved back to New York in 2018, kind of stuck around at the luggage startup until 2020. COVID hit, jumped into a company called Nugs, which is now called Simulate. Was there for a short period of time and then got poached by Olipop in the very early days. I think I was employee number 17 at Olipop when they were still completely unknown outside of like Erewhon, and was there for almost 2 years building out their customer experience team and the second or third hire on e-com. So saw Olipop go from like a small startup to close to 9 figures. I'll probably do like 500 this year. So it was like an incredible career moment for me. Spent almost 2 years there and got pulled by a friend of mine who turns out was Bobby Brown's son, and got pulled into Bobby Brown's new beauty brand called Jones Road Beauty. Again, kind of saw that go from 8 figures to 9 figures, leading both customer experience and retention. Have been sharing a lot online about my journey over the last 4 or 5 years. Have built like this semi-small niche following on both LinkedIn and Twitter, which kind of pushed me into a midlife crisis last year and decided I wanted to do something that was unlike anything I've ever seen. Had a bunch of conversations, led me to the most chaotic move of my career where I said, I'm going to drop everything and kind of go back to my core values of what's exciting for me. Ended up at a SaaS company that raised a couple $100 million, 800 plus employees, 6 offices and 5 products. So have kind of seen CX, building CX teams, building retention teams, have consulted with 90 plus brands in the last couple of years on that, and then threw it all out to kind of go SaaS side and start thinking holistically about brand and how to change sentiment and how to build a new universe around the brand that has been existing since 2011. So that's kind of my quick 30-second / 4-minute spiel.
What have you been, or what would you say has been the most valuable thing that you've taken from your time on the brand side to now being on the software side?
A couple of things. It's a great question. So I'd say a few things. Number one, I think you learn on the brand side through a lot of direct response that the right message kind of resonates, but there's also a long-term play of understanding brand and value and kind of like how do you build ads or strategy that drives lower cost of acquisition as time goes on, right? There's like the pitch this today and then like the long-term game. I think it's SaaS, it's even more relevant when a contract is not, it's not a $35 case of soda. It's $3, $4, $5, $10, $100,000 plus dollars. And you start thinking about it in both ways. There's like, we need to drive demand today, and we need to think holistically about brand and the way people feel and the way they associate your brand. And the second thing I think I learned on the brand side is that people are people. Like, changing from Olipop to Jones Road, like, I thought like, hey, I'm a guy that never wore makeup. I don't know anything about the industry. This is going to be so challenging. And like 3 weeks in, you learn that it's the same thing. Like, once you know what mascara is and what foundation is, like, Jones Road was not that different than Olipop, which was not that different than the watch, like the StockX for watch company that I was consulting for, which was not that different than the luggage company. I mean, they're the nuances are there, but overall, it's like a customer is a customer is a customer. And I think most people try to solve the problem before they understand the problem. So for me, it was like, once you understand what the customer actually thinks and get out of your marketing hat, I think that was like my learning. So it's like not that much of a difference.
And it sounds like most of the companies that you were at before Yotpo, even though they're larger now, you joined them when they were more in that like startup phase. So what has that been like, working at an 800-person company versus being employee number 17?
I think it was, I thought it would be a lot more challenging than it was. And the caveat is, if I had joined a Yotpo 30-person team in like a much larger, like if I joined Yotpo on the CS side, as a CSM, I think it would be a lot more challenging than what I did. And that was my hesitation to joining Yotpo. I was like, oh, it's so big. Like, I wonder how I'm going to be able to navigate it. And I think part of it was, like the CEO says like, hey, we'll create your own little team. And the goal was, can I create a startup within a startup? So, I report to one person. I have one person reporting to me, and I kind of just try to interface with as many people as I need to, and not hundreds. So on any given day, I probably can't tell you more than like 20 people at the whole company or 40 people at the whole company. I'm not like that's just not who I am, but I've been thankful. I'm thankful that I was able to kind of build a very small startup within a startup. The difference, and I guess like two flips to the same coin, is like, on one hand, a larger company generally means like a lot more process. And I think your average 800-person company would take months and months to get something launched and would take forever to get approval. I think in this case, Yotpo kind of still operates like a 20-person team on a lot of ways. Like, we'll come up with an idea and it'll happen within 2 days, and we're kind of sprinting to the finish line, and we launch a campaign without the campaign being ready. And we're kind of like, there's a lot of small startup things that we're still doing at Yotpo, for better or for worse. Definitely culture perspective, it feels a lot smaller than it is, like a lot.
I mean, I think that is the ideal situation. I've worked at companies that are smaller, but they act like, they're Walmart or Google.
Awful.
It's just miserable. And I think it's even worse because like, you're not Google. And so it's like, what the hell are you doing? Like, why do you have all of these processes that are just so archaic and miserable to deal with? It's very, very demotivating. And this is like an unpopular opinion, but it seems like you and I kind of agree on it, is over processing. Like, putting in too many processes is actually like, you think you're being Google with your OKRs, but you're not necessarily, because you have 2 direct reports and you can just have coffee with them and talk to them about what they're doing without having them fill out spreadsheets. I think there's a balance, and it probably also depends on the leader. Like, I'm the kind of leader where I hated all of those. Like, I hated those spending 3 hours to talk about the process versus just doing it. And maybe to a fault, some of my former bosses might say maybe to a fault, like maybe I had too little process, but I've also learned over time that that's just not my strength. So instead of taking 10 years to try to change my DNA, I said, okay, let me lean into the things I'm actually good at. I'm really good at understanding people. I'm really good at reading between the lines. I'm really good at kind of deeply understanding a problem and trying to create a solution for it. CX was my game. How can I pull that and leverage that to work with other companies versus let me get really good at reading fucking spreadsheets? And it's just like, that's not something I like or I want to be good at. So I spent so many years trying to be the spreadsheet guy. And then I was like, no, I can ask somebody to help me with that. Let me just like triple down on the things I actually give a shit about and I'm good at. Yeah. And I think most people just mess that up their whole career. They're trying to learn new things that they don't need to know. Like, you don't know how to code, but you'll never be a coder. So like, if you want to know basic coding because you want to get what your software team is doing, like, have fun, but you're probably wasting your time, because like, I read those books
and maybe you've read the same, Brandon. It's like you read like range by
They're literally they're right back here.
right.
They're unopened. They've
Yes.
been sitting there for 7 years. They're like
Yes.
Python and all that other shit. Yeah.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
never.
Yeah. So I've like even like the other books, like The Range by David Epstein, like you read that and you're like, wait, shit, like it's so great being a generalist. And then you get to a point where you're like, yeah, it's kind of good to know a little bit about everything. Like I will never be in a meeting and be like, I have no idea what you're talking about. Like I know enough to get by, but I probably wasted too much of my time learning a little bit of everything.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that because, I mean, when you're starting a business, you're kind of forced into doing it. But I would routinely look at all of the things I was doing, and part of it was skill, and part of it was just, do I actually do I enjoy doing this or not? Like, just because you're good at something, if you hate doing it, doesn't mean you should do it either, because that also is its own like nightmare. So from there, it was, how do I get this into somebody else's hands and put it on their plate so that I can just focus on the things that I actually, care about, but also am good at. And having those two in parallel was really critical for me to be able to, actually scale and grow a company too, versus it just being like, a single person operator.
Yeah.
But from a process standpoint, like for an agency, you're trying to like productize people. And so processes are inherently required, but I tried, whether it was successful or not, to make it as like crystal clear as possible that just because there was a process did not mean that was, the sole source of truth. It could never change. Like, I think that's one of the biggest issues with processes, is that people don't question them. They don't think about, what they're actually doing strategically. And so then you end up doing the same stuff over and over and over again, when other people are iterating or, being a little bit more dynamic with the way that they're approaching work. And so, we'd have processes and they change like, once every month, because there was a different way to do things. There was a better way to do things. So
I feel that.
On the SaaS side, what's like the most exciting part about being able to work at a company that has massive scale? And how do you think about, like, from your role, and maybe it would help me too to understand, like, what exactly is it that you are doing within the organization? And then, how do you think about, if you are going to implement something, you're talking about tens of thousands of customers, not just a single brand that you're working with.
So, valid question. I don't think anyone would see my title and know what I do. And I think anyone that would guess, probably 95% would be completely wrong, because the title was created by the CEO as like a, what if we called your role this, because we didn't know what my role would be before I joined. So I had this moment where I kind of got to this midlife crisis where I realized I'm going from brand to brand, kind of doing the thing that I was really good at, the thing that everyone told me I'm the best at. And I'm doing it again and again and again. And it's kind of like easy to duplicate. And I'm like, maybe I should just start an agency where I can do this for a ton of brands. And it's just not fulfilling, because I'm already doing it with 50, 60 brands a year on the side in a consulting capacity. And it's still not, I still don't feel great about it. And I kind of had this moment where I was like, okay, I need to open my mind to anything. And I started having a couple of conversations with a few founders in the space. And one of the people I got connected to was the CEO of Yotpo. He was reading my newsletter for a while. We were connected on social, and they sponsored my newsletter. That was like the connection that I made. I had churned as a customer. I had my own feelings about them. We connected because I was like actually blown away as to what they were building. I was like, I never knew that. I thought you were A, B, and turns out you were C, D, and E with a goal of doing like X, Y, and Z. And I said, okay, like, let's talk. I'm actually in not at all, like, I had no intention of ever taking a job on the SaaS side. I wanted his point of view because I've heard great things about him as a leader. And he was like, in the first 2 minutes, he was like, yeah, it's clear you're going to leave. He's like, Eli, you're an entrepreneur without the risk tolerance. And I said, okay, that's fair. And he was like, okay, like, would you consider SaaS? And I said, no, absolutely not. Like, why would I go to SaaS? Like, either I'll start my own thing, or I'll just like find something that's really cool and exciting in the same universe I'm in. And he says, like, I feel like we have a lot of challenges here that you coming in from the outside, from like our ICP, from the person we'd be pitching to with the expertise you have, I feel like you'd be able to deeply understand and maybe suggest fixes for some of the things we're working on outside of product, like just across the org. And he said, like, just have a couple of conversations, be open-minded, see where it goes. And I had a few conversations and quickly realized that like everyone I spoke to was 10 times sharper, 10 times nicer, 10 times more empathetic and thoughtful than I thought they would be. And anyone that has like a marketing brain, the first thing you say is like, that's the opportunity, right? Like this massive gap in between like the perception and reality is always like an arbitrage opportunity. And I said, okay, let me continue having this conversation. He says, okay, let me hire you, take 6 weeks, talk to everyone across the business, see what you're like, talk to leaders across all the teams and see what you think like your first area of opportunity is. Like, just come in and have a good time. And if you hate it, you can leave. And that was the pitch. So I started with a amorphous title, and I basically came in and realized that this massive gap was like the largest opportunity. I can like sit with product, but that's not helpful. They can sit with anyone. The beauty is like, how can I bring them back to the industry? Like, to your point, Yotpo has 30,000 customers across all they're doing very well. They raised hundreds of millions of dollars. They grew to a global business. They're doing well, but where they were struggling, or I'd say like where they had room for growth, was how can we kind of get back to the core of like building for the people that we deeply care about? How can we get better on pricing? How can we get better at understanding the negative sentiment we have in certain corners of the internet and fixing it? I sit in that corner of the internet where people weren't thrilled with them. And I deeply understood why. Like I got it. Like I've churned. I understood they were very aggressive on the sales cycle. They were very aggressive on the cross-selling. They were overpriced, like in certain areas and across certain parts of the business. And I thought like, they're willing to change it. They just want somebody that will kind of help them, give them a sense of like, is this the right direction or the wrong direction? And that was kind of my vision, was like, can I just continue helping them push towards this, like bringing the business back to the consumer? And that ended up being, 50, 60% on marketing, a small percentage on product marketing, a small percentage on sales and CS, et cetera, et cetera. But most of my day-to-day is revolving around two things. Number one, like the marketing we do, and we've done a couple of fun campaigns that I've had a little hand in. And number two, like the universe that we're calling advocacy. And I just hired somebody with, her name is Sam, one of the most incredible people I know. And she has a partnerships background. And the goal was, nothing exists for retention marketers. Like every conference is for growth guys or for CMOs or for CEOs. Every dinner is for D2C founders. Like there's no space in the world for this. When I was in that space, I would hate to go to a conference to have one session that was relevant to me. Why don't we try to create the thing that I was excited about? I'm introverted. I hate leaving my house. She's the polar opposite, loves meeting new people, loves hosting events. And I said, okay, let's just try to do that. Let's build a universe for the people that we're serving. And obviously a long-term effect to create much more awareness around retention, but also much more awareness about Yotpo and the people at Yotpo, and the insight that I had where the people and the perception didn't match. That's like the high level day-to-day of the two things I mostly play in.
I mean, the perception component is really fascinating to me because, all the way back in whatever it was, 2019, there was like the darling, software companies of the Shopify ecosystem. And then, just to use email and SMS as an example, but like, Klaviyo was the love child of Shopify, and
after MailChimp
was like, yes, after MailChimp. And then Attentive came in with its, $800+ million raised, sending AirPods, to people multiple times a day.
The glory days.
And and everybody loved to hate them. And then now, it's transitioned to everybody loves to hate on Klaviyo, and Attentive actually isn't that bad. And then I remember, everybody used to love to hate on Yotpo in like 2021, 2022.
Including myself.
Now it's me as well. I also was like, it's not working for me. But that has all changed, and the transition, has been rather quick. And I think that, that consumer sentiment, I think, matters more than a lot of people might give credit to, because the industry is so incestuous and everybody talks with one another, and word gets out rather quickly about what is working and what isn't working. And even if, and I ran into this a couple times where, we'd have a new client that would come on with us, and they were like new to the Shopify ecosystem. So maybe they were on Magento, or they were a custom website, and like, they're just Googling stuff. And so Yotpo's SEO was ridiculous. I mean, it probably still is, but in 2020, 2021, it was ridiculous. They got signed up to some crazy annual contract that they didn't actually need.
Yep.
No idea how to use it. And then they're just pissed off and they just entered into the Shopify ecosystem. That has changed entirely. But like there's other companies that are now doing that right now as well. And the ramifications of that are long term.
I think I've spoken to probably a few hundred people in the last year. I think Brandon, you gave a synopsis on this in 3 minutes better than most. I'll tell you two things. Number one, what's the one common thing between Klaviyo, Attentive, Yotpo? I mean, like they're all sub $100 million in ARR. They're all the darlings of Shopify. They're all tens of thousands of customers. Recharge, I mean, like we'd be remiss not to talk about, like they've gone through a bunch of stuff.
Yep.
It's also, these are like the four horsemen of Shopify, and they've all raised a ton of money. They've all built incredible businesses. Klaviyo was like you said, the darling. And again, it's like businesses that get to a certain velocity and then just lose, they end up starting to build, like Recharge is a great example. Amazing, amazing, amazing product. But then it goes from like the market to the spreadsheet. And I think that's the kind of point where they're like, okay, we have thousands and tens of thousands of customers. Let's just focus on the numbers. And the further you get away from the market, the more you create spaces for the reviews provider that's like, no, I'll give you the same exact thing, or like 90% of what Yotpo's offering for $200 a month instead of $800. And then Yotpo will say, yeah, but we have X, Y, and Z bell. And most people say like, I don't need X, Y, and Z bell. And I think like the agility that a brand like Stamped might have, or a company like Stamp might have, is not the agility that a company like Recharge or Yotpo or whatever has. And I think that's the evolution of businesses as they grow. But it's also, like you said, an incestuous ecosystem, people making short-term decisions while trying to play a long-term game. And the question becomes like, okay, if you can get back to basics, and I think Attentive, I don't know much about them, but I know Recharge is kind of on this mission of just like, let's get back to the basics and rediscover what we built and see if we can kind of win back the confidence and kind of let's go back to basics. Let's try to like fix the bugs. Like if somebody's going to pay, okay, so even if we fix the pricing at Yotpo, assume we go from $3,000 a month to now $600, and we're at par or maybe a tiny bit more expensive than like Okendo, which like built a business on being the cheaper Yotpo, right? Now that like our pricing's better, but you still have to fix the bugginess, you still have to fix the UX, and you still have to like there are things that and that's been like Yotpo's mission now is like, hiring me is not going to help the product. Hiring me is not going to help the pricing. Like I can try to bring you closer to the ecosystem and stand between the haters and say like, hey, I'm one of you. I hated them. I made the change. Like I gave up a great job at a great company for this. Mm-hmm. So either you say, which a lot of my friends did say, Eli, you're a dumbass. A lot of my friends said that. And they're like, this is the worst decision of your career. And I'm like, namaste, thank you. I'll talk to you never. And I had obviously reserves, but I've made okay choices until now. So like, give me a little bit of credibility. Like I haven't failed miserably yet with zero education and zero background. Like I've been okay. So give me a little bit of belief. So that was like, my thought was like, just trust me that I see something here that you don't. And if you're insanely cocky and you hate Yotpo way too much, which I get, like people have been ripped off. They dislike their experience. If you hate them, just leave me alone and continue doing what you're doing. But if you think that I saw something that maybe you don't see, and you're open to giving a chance that, hey, things can change and people can evolve and businesses can make bad decisions, then like, let's see what they'll do over the next 12 months. And that was like again, risk I took, very, very large risk. Some would say like I was getting paid okay at a business that broke 9 figures. They'll exit in a couple of years for a lot of money. Like leaving Jones was on paper a terrible decision. But I saw opportunity. And I like a good challenge. I like fun. I like having to like actually work really hard to make something win. We'll see.
I think Yotpo was ahead of every other software company when it came to this movement to all-in-one platforms with a suite of products, underlying this larger umbrella. And you see every other software company doing the same thing now. And I think the ones that are in trouble are the apps that could have been like amazing companies, but they went and raised a bunch of money off of a feature, not off of a platform, And now they're trying to go from being a feature to being a platform, which is, I would say, almost impossible, versus those that, started as the platform and now they're adding on additional components, or, they just look at X app and they're like, yeah, we'll throw that into our platform here. I mean, a lot of these products are becoming commoditized, like reviews. I mean, how many reviews apps can there possibly be on Shopify? I think there's like 820 the last time that I looked. So you're not selling a brand because of how great your reviews widget is, because everybody's review widget is not the exact same.
Yeah.
So how do you differentiate beyond that? And I think in 5 years, because e-com is it's a very immature industry.
Correct.
Like B2B is far more mature. And when I look at B2B, there's like Salesforce, there's HubSpot, there's giants that have this massive suite of products underneath them. I think that's where e-com will be in 5-10 years. But the players that have that platform approach and are also operating from a greater position of strength, not just from capital, but from what was their first product, like how integral to a e-com brand's business is it? Subscription, very important. Email, SMS, all of that, very important. A cross-selling app, maybe not as much. Reviews, really not as much. So depending on where you started, I feel like there's a significant advantage for those like a Yotpo or like a Klaviyo or even a Recharge to be able to extend into other product lines versus the other way around.
Correct. I agree with all that. And I'll tell you two things. Number one, I know you probably remember, I definitely remember when Yotpo acquires Swell and everyone's like, this is the dumbest shit ever. Like, what are you doing? Like what? And yes, fun story. Everyone is doing everything now. So I agree. Like everyone thought and still thinks like, what are they doing? Nobody wants a platform. And like everyone said the same when they acquired Swell, and everyone said the same when they acquired SMS Bump. And it's a story that, and again, it's like, this is not like they've won the arms race at all by any stretch, but this is like, they're playing a very long game, which I think is easy to play when you have reviews, when you have loyalty. Like those two, if you started with SMS and the margin's so thin, like we look at, I look at competitors and I'm like, you offered a price that you beat us by 30%. There's no way you're even breaking even. Like after Twilio fees, like there's no way you're breaking even unless you have some deal that nobody else knows exists. And you're probably losing money on every text they send. But when you have reviews and loyalty, and then you have like email, then you have the ability to plug SMS in as one of the tools and go crazy on that. So I think there's obviously, and Tomer, our CEO, can speak much more to the margin piece than I can, but I think there's obviously a beautiful story you can tell from a business side when you go wide like that. But again, like the biggest challenge to all of that is, and let's not be naive to the fact that like the first question people ask is like, you're doing 5 things. Like, why should I think you're good at any of them? Like, I'll just go to the person that's doing this the best. Like, why would I entertain using you for, I don't know, email or SMS when I can just go to the best in class, right? So that's also like, that's a challenge with being what you think is 5-10 years ahead is you still have to deal with it today, right? That's what I talk about a lot is like if you're living 10 years ahead, but nobody sees your today plan, that's also kind of dumb. So it's like a very, very challenging walk to walk.
But best in class, I think people forget about the fact that all these software companies eventually will have to make money. Or
they hate to think about that.
Yeah. Like at a certain point, or you just can't keep raising into perpetuity. So, there's just isn't a big enough market to support like a best in class, I don't know, reviews provider or
that's
a best in class
crazy
returns
cheap
provider. Yeah. Like you have to look at consolidation. And I think there is also a lot of benefit to consolidation when the products are complementary and actually, can benefit the merchant, not just from a cost savings perspective, but the ability to, work more cohesively and provide a better customer experience.
And I'd also say like Michael that sells like $24 coffee on Shopify website doesn't need like every bell and whistle that the 9-figure beauty brand needs when it comes to their email. And they probably don't need all the crazy features that the best in class SMS provider has. And they might not need the crazy features that like the reviews platform has. And I think that's also a mistake that a lot of industries, I think we messed up in e-com the most is like everyone somehow got convinced that it's like a laundry list. Like they will literally come into a demo and compare like 900 items that we have versus what they don't have. And you go through them and you're like, which of these are you even using? Because like you don't need a build a bundle feature when you don't have more than one product and have no plan on having more than what is happening. So I think it's also like, and we did this to ourselves. We became a feature race.
Yeah, and I much prefer, and I know in some regards Yotpo does this, in some ways it doesn't. There's a couple of software companies that really don't abide by this at all, and then there's others where it really is just usage based. But from an agency standpoint, I hated working with the software companies that would have like 4 different tiers for a single product that were gated behind paywalls, because then, you know, I can't leverage the same thing for my $4 million a year brand that I can for my $50 million a year brand. And then we have to go look at, you know, more mid-tier solutions for, let's say, loyalty as an example. Loyalty was a big one, especially when, I think back in 2020, like we used Loyalty Line a lot.
Yep.
Everything that I thought was truly needed to have a loyalty program that could potentially work was gated behind their $1,200 a month plan, which, right, you know, you're not signing up a new startup for, or, you know, a couple million of GMV company for. I much prefer the usage model where it just scales based off of that and everybody gets all the same features and functionality.
You're 100% right. And I think a lot of that happened because like some of it is the service model where like they still had to provide the same CSM and the same X, Y, and Z for the $1,200 plan as they had to do for the $25,000 plan. And then the economics becomes confusing. And the answer to that, which I think people are learning now, is so figure out a self-service model and charge self-service pricing and kind of like build the product differently. But I think that's an evolution in SaaS where we say like, if you actually want to give a great price, then like figure out a service model that supports the price and give people more optionality. And I think Yotpo's also kind of said, okay, if pricing is the thing and we can go bundling and make our economics work, then like let's offer a crazy aggressive price against all the tools. So even if our reviews is $10 more a month and our loyalty is slightly more than Loyalty Line, when you go full platform, it's a no-brainer. It's like ridiculous. You're saving $20,000 a year, right? And to have that, to have those economics takes going wide, which again, like when you go wide, how do you scale a team to, you can scale your team to thousands of employees just to build something that hasn't made money yet. So it's like, it's a very, very thoughtful. And again, it's like a 10, 12, 13, 14, 25 year approach to be able to like create a product that's driving revenue. Now your reviews product is driving revenue. Make sure that you can take some of that to kind of build your next product, but also like don't piss off the reviews customers because they don't want to be paying $20,000 a year to fund your next product. So then you raise money, but then you're like, you raise too much money, right? I think there's no winning, but also most people don't know the full story. And for me, it was like, okay, now I get day one, I realized, okay, there's no malicious intent. It's just like, yeah, they've made some mistakes. Like the same e-com brands do every day to their customers, because I've seen their back end. Like I've seen how they screw their customers from time to time, and it's no big deal that their customer had to wait 2 months for a back order. Like it's for some reason it's become like, how could they? But you do the same thing. Like being on both sides, I saw the level of hypocrisy that I didn't ever think would exist. Like we talk about like how like people will be the biggest assholes to their CSM, and like their job is literally director of customer service. And I'm like, do you not get that? And I personally, when I joined Yotpo, like a couple of months later, I went on like a little apology tour to a few CSMs I had, I swear, like CSMs I had at Olipop, where I was like, I was kind of an asshole and I thought that you owed me the world and you were just doing your job, and I'm sorry. And it's a culture we create, and people do the same thing to agencies. Like I'm sure you know, is like they treat them like garbage. Yes. And then when your customers talk that way to you, you're like, oh, I'm going to fire them as a customer. But like you don't get that, right? Like what?
Yeah. People need that like perspective. And I think you're getting it as a byproduct of going on to the other side. But yeah, I mean, the agency client relationship, I mean, I don't miss that.
Toxic.
Yeah, it was always, I mean, in one way, not that shocking, but I mean, you would have in-house team members who they didn't know what the hell they were doing. but because they were in-house, they had like that veil of protection.
Yep.
And the firing squad was out on the agency at any and all times for anything that could potentially have gone wrong.
And you can't say it's their person, because then it's a bad look for you.
Exactly. So, that was fun. Definitely don't miss that.
Wow.
What are you most excited for Yotpo, going into the rest of the year, into next year? What, you've been there for, I think, like 9-10 months at this point. What excites you the most moving forward?
I've been thinking about this a lot over the last 24 hours, because yesterday I left my house at 5:30, drove to New York City, got to the office at 7:30, left the office at 7:45 p.m. and got home at 9:30. Like, it was like the longest day I've had in a while. And I got home at 9:30 feeling like rejuvenated. And I'm like, what? I've never had this where I can work 12 hours, commute 2 hours each way, and get home feeling that way. Like, what is it? And a lot of it is like my own journey, where I grew up and got into a world that I knew nothing about, and felt a chip on my shoulder. Like, wow, he doesn't deserve this. He doesn't know shit about this industry. He's got to learn. Like, he's got to climb up to the top. And then I ended up at brands that were crushing, and like wearing an Olipop hoodie, or like having Jones Road on my LinkedIn profile got me a certain kind of like, oh, he's at the great brand. Like, oh yeah, like he's at a brand that's crushing it. And now again, like, on paper, Yotpo is doing great, but they have like a challenge to overcome, and like a mission that they're doing. And it feels great to have a chip on the shoulder again. It's like, oh, you hate Yotpo? Tell me more. Like, I'd love to hear that. I'm a CX person. I love when you hate Yotpo. Like, I was at the lead, and a massive brand came over, and they're like, you guys screwed us. And I'm like, 20 minutes, let's sit down. I want to hear everything that went wrong. I'm not a support person, but I sit close enough to leadership. I promise you I can fix it. And that kind of chip on the shoulder has been invigorating beyond anything I've ever had. But also, this is entirely new. I've never worked in SaaS. I've never done anything outside of like CX and retention and growth and ops. Like, I've never worked on brand marketing at this lens, at creating spaces for people. This is all new. So chip on the shoulder, new challenge, a ton to learn. And I think over the next like 6 months, I'd say, like, looking back over the last 6 months, we've done the Frown campaign, which was like an AI generated campaign talking about how people make their customers frown when they send full blast text, and how Yotpo is like on a mission to tell you to send less text, which between you and I actually makes sense for our business model, because the margins we're making aren't on the SMS. It's when a customer actually likes us and goes, so well, let's save you money on SMS. So you talk to us about a wider platform, which is actually something we can do, most can't. We launched Robin, who's like, you've probably seen on Twitter, got into like some sort of thing and said like, yeah, let's have a debate where like Tomer debates like the people that hate Yotpo the most. And we offered somebody who probably people can guess didn't say yes. So instead we had Sean from Ridge, which is, we pulled up tweets where he said like, Yotpo is the worst thing. I'd rather shut down my website than use Yotpo. And name a scummier company than Yotpo. I mean, I literally found like 20 mean tweets to read, and they had a debate. Like, it was Sean from Ridge, Taylor Holiday, and Tomer. That was like organic, completely Robin, just off the cuff. That was not planned. That was like a very, very splashy podcast with a couple of thousand views within incestuous D2C. So it was like made a lot of moves. And then like the third one, which we just launched last week, was this like walk away shoe, where we created an actual shoe for people to walk away from what they're used to. And I think you'll see a lot more of that in the next 12 months, where we say like, let's do splashy things that, yes, drive the bottom line and drive demand, but also kind of bring the world more into the universe that Yotpo is building, because Yotpo has been like an elusive company that no one knew anyone that worked at Yotpo, but they knew the salespeople they got on calls to churn with. Like, nobody knew the inside of Yotpo. And it's like the next 12 months, I think you'll see a lot more of that. I can't speak for product because it's not my universe, but I think everything will get better in terms of like UX, UI, et cetera, which is like unspoken. But also kind of like you'll see a more fun, vibrant, unique side to Yotpo that people have started seeing over the last 6 months. I think over the next 6 months, you'll see a lot more bets and big swings that we're taking of like, seems interesting, seems fun, let's have some fun with it. It's the same budget. Instead of spending a ton of money on Facebook ads and SEO, like let's try to have fun with it. People know of Yotpo, they just don't necessarily love it, right? Like, we don't need billboards that say Yotpo SMS. We need to give people a reason to understand that Yotpo has evolved and it's actually fun and different, and trying to be thoughtful and creative again. So I think it'll be fun.
Yeah, I saw those shoes all over LinkedIn. They were super cool.
The crazy story about that, Brandon, is this shoe drove millions of impressions, but the fun fact is only 6 shoes were actually created so far. We had like a massive, like literally the day of the launch, like our kind of partner that was creating this was like, yeah, we don't have the shoes. And we're like, well, fuck. And we ended up like somebody on the team went to the factory to be like, no, this, like, let's go. But this whole splash was from 6 shoes, and 2 of them still didn't like get to the people that it's like 3 people shared it. And then a bunch of posts from the Yotpo team without actual physical shoes. Like we had 1 pair in the office. We'll have a few hundred produced that are in the works now, but like, how crazy is that this is like, it's just something that people feel and it resonates and they say, wow, okay, like this campaign makes sense on a few levels and it's thoughtful and creative and fun. And the bar in B2B SaaS is really low. So
yes, significantly.
So
adding in a little creativity and taking yourself a little less serious, I think will go a long way in engendering some good faith within the community.
Yeah.
Well, I got one last question for you, and then I'll let you go. But what are you most worried about for the ecosystem as a whole over the next 3 to 5 years?
I mean, I think I'm not a macroeconomist, and I've never taken an econ class in my life. But I think if you look at what anyone with a brain is saying, and you look at the numbers, and you look at like the current economic environment, like ecom's not easy. Ecom's never been easy. The margins, the cost of acquisition, like I've always been on that side where it's like, if retention is not going to work, this thing is not like the days of kind of like Oberlo and kind of like getting a couple of drop ship stuff like that. Those days are kind of over, and to create a profitable business is super, super hard. And I think the next like 3 to 5 years, we're still not in ecom summer. Like we're still in the winter. And I think it's been challenging to see brands that you know and love go out of business where you're like, wait, I thought you were doing well. It'll be a squeeze. Like, I don't think you need me to tell you that, but I think it'll be a squeeze. And I think it's going to be like a interesting / challenging year or 2 or 3. But I think over time, like to me, something I was bullish on in 2016 was how important retention is. And even if you could break even on order number 1, that's not how you build a brand. That's how you build a product. Like breaking even on order number 1 is how you build like a drop shipping company. That's not how you build Nike. Nike wasn't built on breaking even with CAC on Facebook ads. And building brand is not growth guys running ads from their mom's basement. Like that's just not what brand is. And to me, that's something I bet on in 2016 when you were able to go on LinkedIn in 2016 and find like 4 people with retention in their title. I know because I checked. And it was lifecycle marketing and email marketing and CRM manager. And now you're seeing retention everywhere. That to me is like the bullish, the 5 to 10 year. I'm bullish on that. Like I'm bullish on people putting importance in the 2 things I care about with is experience and retention, and building businesses that are focused on brand, not just CAC.
And I think the bar has been raised pretty significantly for e-com brands because, everybody and their brother opened up a Shopify store during COVID, and, you don't need 500 coffee brands selling direct to consumer. There
are a lot of there are a lot of people struggling because it was easy, right? If you could spend $20 and make $50, like that's a printer I want to keep pressing. But then you realize that like, no, because you actually have to pay to get the coffee to you, and that has gone up. And then Zuck has kind of turned the printer up, and now you realize that like your margins are okay, they're not great. And then you want to hire a team because you can't do everything. Like everything dried out so quickly that like the heyday of growth marketing to just kind of build a business on it is long gone. Growth marketers still won't be humbled because that's the DNA. Shout out to my growth guys. But I think like you're seeing it evolve where like now you see like any great growth marketer has a great retention person by their side. And they understand that bringing in the right customer is more important than just bringing in customers. They understand that the ads you run and the acquisition you do really has a big part in the customer outside of product, we all know product's important, blah, blah, blah. We get that. But outside of product, like if you have the greatest coffee in the world, but the person you acquired doesn't drink coffee, that doesn't fucking help anyone. So I think we're learning those two things are so important. And I'm excited. Like I'm obviously excited that I like when retention people have a seat at the table and experienced people have a seat at the table, but I'm excited because that's the brand that I want to purchase from, right? I want to purchase from a brand that gives a shit, not like scammed me into like a Facebook ad coffee that seemed like it was cheap and then they added shipping insurance. Like
try this coffee for $4 and then auto
Plus
opt
shipping.
into $100. Yeah. Auto opt into $100 a month subscription program. And then everybody's looking at each other like, why do we have 90% cancellation rate and enough chargebacks to kill somebody?
Touche.
It's not rocket science here.
Exactly. I'm excited. Like that's the exciting part.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate you coming on and giving all of your insight. This has been fun. This was really fun.
Yeah.
Before we hop though, can you let everybody who's listening know where they can find you online?
Yeah, I'm Eli Weiss with an extra S. So it's ELIWEISSS.com or Eli Weiss with an extra S on Twitter or just Eli Weiss on LinkedIn. And Yotpo is just Yotpo, but you knew that. So
who's the EliWeiss.com without the extra S?
I wish, like, I tried to get Eli Weiss on Twitter and it was like some like porn account that hasn't been touched in like 25 years. And Eli Weiss, just EliWeiss.com. It might be like, first of all, Eli Weiss is like too common of a name. I'm like checking now because I'm actually curious. That's like the other problem is like Eli Weiss is just too common. I think actually EliWeiss.com is, it's just like a WordPress.
It looks like
it's like publications. What am I missing here?
Yeah, and some photography.
Oh, okay. Oh, so funny enough, this guy like connected with me on like LinkedIn at some point. He's like, I have the same name as you, and I'm like, yeah, I know, motherfucker. Can you not like sit on this site? And he's like a super kind Gen Zer from like Seattle or something that means well and just won't give up his domain. So I just added an S to my name.
You could just get EliWeiss.ai and then you'll be like every company out there.
I know. I was like considering .co or like, do I want to be like EliWeiss.biz? And I was like, I'm already stuck with the Twitter usernames. Let me just own it.
Well, the funniest thing when I first entered the ecosystem and I was learning like who were the industry incumbents and I like Googled Sharma, and the first thing that actually shows up is
chef.
Some cook. Yeah, some chef. I'm like, if even he can't deal with this, and then I'm not too concerned about my Twitter handle then.
Yeah. He's like he just became the D2C guy because going against the Indian chef wasn't going to happen for him.
Yes, that makes sense. Well, again, thank you for coming on. For everybody listening, as always, this is Brandon Amoroso. You can find me at brandonamoroso.com, electricmarketing.com, or scaleless.ai.
Thanks,
I unfortunately do have an AI domain.
Listen, you take what you can get. Good to talk to you and good to officially connect.